Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. I am very, very excited to bring to you this next guest. And I think I originally met him maybe 2 or 3 years ago. One of the gems of having social media is being able to connect with people that aren't in your backyard or anywhere really even close. Somebody who I don't know if we would have ever rubbed elbows if it was not for social media. And he did a tremendous job of being persistent and really coming to me with some conversations and some topics sometimes that were near and dear to my heart, and really, I think, have forged a nice relationship over the years. But Ben Lee from Northern Illinois University, he's in his first year there, and I'm really excited to have you today, Ben. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Josh. Really appreciate what you guys are doing with the Academy and everything. Really honored to be on here with you.
Well, hey, let's jump right into it. I mean, I kind of alluded to it in the intro there, but something that I think that you've done well, not only with myself, but through colleagues of mine, is really, really embrace a version of being the mentee that I think is extremely effective. Are there some things that went into your development of being what I would call a really, really good mentee? I mean, what are some things that you think about when trying to seek out a mentor and continue a relationship with a mentor?
Yeah, I think, first of all, having a very strong initial mentor was a huge part of that process. My high school basketball coach, who's now the athletic director and also the head coach, and one of my best friends, Kyle McVeigh, was a huge mentor for me in that area and just taught me what it would look like to be a mentee as well as my mentor, if that makes any sense. Like, kind of going up the ladder, I would see how he related with other coaches at the college level. He would take me on trips to different colleges to watch his games, or sometimes go to practice, stuff like that. And I would see him in a role as a mentee. And so kind of having that vicarious experience of seeing how much like my greatest mentor was such a great mentee, and how he had greater mentors, it taught me to be like, man, I got to ask good questions. I got to find people that really align with the same passion as me, that are kind of in the same streets as me, or kind of have those similar passions and similar hearts for different areas of service. And just the way he did that really pushed me to really fall in that line as well, not just with coaching, but with physical therapy. So you're one of those people that I stumbled across as well on social media. Just seeing your involvement in youth sports, something I really am passionate in as well. But really seeking out someone who you can almost like a version of yourself 10 years from now or 5 years from now, and kind of envisioning what did that look like, and then putting yourselves and surrounding yourselves with those people in your community, and then also outside of your community through social media, filling up your feed with a lot of that good stuff, is a great way to start off. And then really asking great questions, doing your homework, seeing what they are interested in, and really diving into that and asking good questions off of that.
Ben, I think that's tremendous. I mean, you touched on so many really, really good points there. I think a big thing that I view, at least being a mentor, is giving somebody a hand up, right? I mean, you always hear the quote or the phrase, standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think that we're always looking to find somebody that's maybe in a position that we want to be in. And maybe we're not trying to stand directly above them, but we're trying to stand like off on a parallel path at some point, and needing to do what we can to actually filter through information, because it can be tough on social media to find those people that really gravitate towards our personal goals, our personal ambition. And I think you've done just such a good job of that. I know you've reached out to other members of our team and other people in the PT community. You mentioned basketball. That was something you had late exposure to, right? And it's been, something that's kind of almost been a parallel in your life with regards to your time and energy. What, things are you thinking about when it comes to just community ties and community involvement, even to the point where, right, you're coaching and you're still engaging with that even as you go through PT school?
Yeah, in terms of community involvement, I would say the team, so kind of get some context. I went to a small private school, Schaumburg Christian School, We still play in the public school leagues in Illinois, but amongst the lowest tier. And so in that setting, we have about probably 200 to 300 high school students. High school basketball, we have 25 guys. So it's a smaller, tight-knit community. So I'm glad you brought up that word, Josh, that like community, super important. When I think of community in terms of the basketball team, I think of parents getting involved. I think of getting our players involved within our school as well. For example, like one thing that we have done in the past and continue to do is have high school athletes or high school basketball players coach elementary feeder leagues, and giving those kids such close contact with people they would consider role models. And really, again, like giving them a hand up, helping the elementary kids stand on the shoulders of those varsity kids is something that we do as well. In terms of other community things, I can think of like sponsorships. Sometimes we go out, have the guys, engage with various other people within our community. In games as well, we have, sometimes we have local people coming out to those as well. But really just getting the people amongst our school and the parents and the families involved in the program, involved in a common goal, which is really like youth sports, helping those kids stay active, give them a goal, and maybe for some of them, a future in college athletics or a path towards a college education as well.
I think that's tremendous, and I have a pretty good idea, but correct me if I'm wrong. These are not necessarily always kids that have everything. Is that correct?
What do you mean by that?
This is not as an affluent area. Some of the places where you're inserting yourself are kids that maybe are a little bit more, at risk or in certain areas where the involvement in these youth programs are something that is very, very productive for them.
It depends. In the Schaumburg area, it tends to be a little bit more affluent. And because we are a private school, we do have kids with better access to these things. So I would say not necessarily for our area. Northwest suburbs of Chicago tend to be a little more affluent. But then again, I think these kids can also fall on a different end of the spectrum where they almost have it so well off that physical activity is something that they don't necessarily gravitate towards. Maybe more of a sedentary lifestyle. Maybe they get more involved in stuff after school, or they just have like a really nice console at home and like to sit around and play video games all day. So there definitely is a big need for that as well. But in terms of like a lower socioeconomic status, stuff like that, I don't think that would be what our community would fall into as well, though.
Got it. I'm thinking about a different area of Chicago, and maybe I'm mixing up the event that you did in Belize, where you're obviously going somewhere and using sports a little bit more as a vehicle. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So kind of even going back on your first question about having mentors in my life, one of my huge mentors as well is Dr. Jen Jacobs. She's a sports psychology professor here at NIU. Had her in one of my undergraduate classes, and we managed to keep talking over various different ways. We were connected over different passions. We both are very passionate about youth sport and really the sport to life transfer element for youth athletes and how we can teach life skills and psychological skills through sport. And so she is a part of a partnership with our university and the National Sports Council in Belize. And so I got an opportunity to go with her twice over there, actually. The first time we ran a week-long, kind of like a coaches summit or a coaches training program to really have the sports counselors, which they wear like many, many different hats in Belize, to administration, coaching, setup, everything across the board. We had those sports counselors come in for a week-long training led by NIU students, of which I was a part of. And then the following year, the second time we went, we had a women's sports summit. So we had some sports counselors, we had people from various city councils. Sometimes like we had the head coach of the university basketball team come out as well. And people from the, drawing a blank, but one of the like youth organizations of the country, we had them come out as well for that. And so that was all about gender equity in sport. In Belize, they're, I would say a little bit like behind the times in quotes, of the societal stereotype that only males play sports and females are meant to go home and cook and clean and stuff like that. So we really wanted to fight that stereotype and really show them what females are capable of, and kind of help facilitate more female athlete involvement at the youth sport level, and also advocating for equal opportunities and pay for female athletes in Belize. So that kind of ties into a little bit of, giving those a hand up that maybe have less access to sport, whether it be financially or even through societal norms and such.
Yeah, and I think when, obviously we've been talking a lot about youth sports, and we're talking about things like equity, and we're talking about the impact that sport can have for kids, regardless of background, regardless of what country they're in. Something that we've talked about as well is, contributors to long-term outcomes. So things that are going on with them now that could potentially be positive, or some of the things that youth athletes deal with on a regular basis that are leading to negative outcomes. Mm-hmm. What are some of the conversations that you're having with your youth athletes, as well as the parents, that you think many people should be hearing more on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think something that I'm really passionate about, and I tend to often fall into this conversation one way or another, is early sport specialization. And youth that say like, oh, coach, how many hours should I practice a day? Or, even high school kids that are freshmen, sophomore, even juniors that are like thinking of quitting the soccer team or quitting baseball to focus on basketball. And I'm like, well, I don't know, that's a great idea. Like, I think, we should move more in different, in different areas, and exposing your body to different planes of movement and different types of movement is healthy for it. And also, it's also, maybe you'll fall in love with baseball and you'll end up, that's a sport that you end up being better at, or, better at, in quotes, I guess. I even had a girl yesterday. I was training a group of like 4th to 6th graders, just having them move and have some fun before they went out to basketball. And I asked her like, hey, so what's your favorite sport? And she's like, that's a really bad question, because I like all sports, and like whatever season it is my favorite sport. And I was like, the inside of me was like, yeah, just what you did, the fist pump. I'm like, yeah, let's go. She's like, when it's softball season, softball's my favorite sport. When it's soccer season, soccer's my favorite sport. And I'm like, let's go. That's awesome. And like took like 2-3 minutes to talk to the kids. I'm like, hey, it's like, that's a perfect answer. That's my favorite answer, actually, because it's so good to get exposed to different movements. But I think if I were to tell parents or youth athletes any one single thing, it's to keep moving and diversify your movement. Don't make sport something that is all about competing and all about winning and all about doing what I'm good at. Expose yourself. Have your child expose themselves to different sports and different physical activities, because you never know what might fit best for them. And plus, research shows that oftentimes athletic development and healthy musculoskeletal development comes through diverse sports in different planes, different surfaces, with different goals, different focuses. So just keep moving and move in different ways. Like, there will come a time when you can specialize in a sport. Maybe it's junior, senior year of high school and college, but take advantage of those early years in life. Take advantage of the different seasons when it's warm outside, when it's cold outside. Like, play indoor, outdoor sports, turf, court, field, whatever, water. But keep exposing yourself to different movements is what I would say.
Yeah, and that's so critical. I know you're a big advocate of, right, sport for life, right? So the more that we are playing a wide variety of different sports, the more likely we're probably to engage in physical activity when we're older, because everything seems to be on the table for us, right? I can jump into a wide variety of different activities. I have relative physical literacy, right? Where I can be familiar with doing something with my hands or do something with my legs, or, hey, I can pick up this and hit this or throw this. So, I mean, that being one of those things that, I mean, I've had way too many young kids in the office this year, and I don't know if it's just because they're home more and parents are trying to structure them with sport coaches, but I've had 9-year-old tennis, I've had 10-year-old baseball, and it really surprises me. I don't know if it's lack of awareness or just misguided intent by parents, but it's been very, very challenging to kind of start some of the conversations surrounding the fact that what they're doing isn't tremendously beneficial, and it might actually be counterproductive in the long run. have you had any particular conversations that really stand out to you, or maybe some examples of resources or information that have led you to a point where maybe you've made that conversation a little bit more productive?
Yeah. In terms of like conversations, not as much. To be very honest, I'm 22. Like I have very
Wait till
limited
you get in the
experience.
clinic, right?
Yeah, I haven't even gotten in the clinic yet. Like as a
Yeah.
student, I'm still in the classroom. Um, I think conversations are mainly with kids. I can think like of a particular example. During a basketball camp, we were doing like a film session, and then at the end we had like a Q&A session. I was one of the court leaders, so I was there as a coach, but also to coach and be coached. And one of the athletes asked the coach, like, "Hey, how many like hours should I practice a week in the gym?" And then one of the coaches was like, "Oh, 10,000 hour rule or whatever." And then the head coach running the whole thing was like, "No, no, 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 no. Like, actually, you should, diversify movement." And he kind of did it in a very like he didn't do it in a very like scientific or like literature type way for these kids. He did it more or less kind of like the way I described earlier of like, hey, have fun, like explore different sports. You never know what you might be good at. And so like I guess one thing I would say of conversations based off that experience and based off a couple other experiences is speaking in a way that is meaningful to the person that you're trying to get your point across to. So if it's a kid or an athlete, depending on the age, gear more towards having fun, or like maybe say, hey, you have some friends that also play soccer, and if the kid only plays basketball, they could be like, oh yeah, and doing it in that way. If it's a parent, maybe we can get into more like research shows this, or like exposing your kids to different movements and talk about like sport for life and stuff like that. And in terms of like resources, I found definitely the LTAD model. I discovered it somehow over social media like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then just did a deep dive onto it, listened to a few podcasts. A name that comes to mind is Derek Miles over at Barbell Medicine. He had a really interesting role at Stanford Children's Hospital there, and he's very well read on that. So we had a cool little conversation, very brief on that over the phone. And then there are a couple professors as well, I think out of the state of Michigan, that are more involved in advocating for LTAD. But if you have not heard of the LTAD model, look it up. Stands for long-term athletic development. So it tends to turn LTAD. And it really starts at like a fundamentals with the emphasis on the word fun. And it really ends at a active for life portion. And it's really a spectrum on the way up. And they have a cool little like pictographic, whatever you call it, for visual learners to kind of see how we progress from like learn to train to train, and really making the path from like early exposure to sport to active for life very tangible and very easy to grasp and understand as you go along. So I highly, highly recommend that as a resource for anyone that's interested in youth sport or anything that we're talking about today.
It's pretty crazy how they have it down to a science, and it's now like there's something called growmetry. You can measure your kid and measure like their height velocity, and then you can plug them in and kind of have an idea of what is most trainable at that point in their development. It's kind of all going around height velocity and how when you get to peak height velocity, that's really your growth spurt, so to speak. But there's these windows of trainability. I know that's more into the scientific side of things, and we probably don't want to dive deep into that today for the listeners. But for anybody who really wants to nerd out, there's definitely levels to this. Great places to look. Canada, just as a whole, has a really, really good model out there. American hockey's got a good one. Lacrosse for the United States, they just came up with their own version of it. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is if you follow the same plan for an athlete right up until about peak height velocity, they can either go to being that active for life individual or towards being an elite athlete. Like the road up until that growth spurt is very, 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 very similar in terms of the things that you're trying to accomplish. So sometimes I think exposing parents to that and that way of thinking, and then you get to some of the stories about some of the most high achieving athletes out there. I mean, it's it's something that a lot of them can really get on board with. But for you, let's go directly into your specific role, right? You're doing strength training with youth athletes. What are some things that you're focusing on the most? And I would say, how does that tie over to PT in general, especially as I think about the phrase general physical preparation?
Yeah, the old GPP, gotta love it. So right now I am my official title is an assistant strength and development coach, and I work at a facility called M14 Hoops, which is like a big youth basketball facility out in Aurora, Illinois, one of the suburbs. It's further away from the city of Chicago. It's closer to where I live out in the cornfields, where Northern Illinois is. But basically, we have kids from 4th grade through 12th grade in that facility. Their main focus is on the court, basketball wise. But I managed to stumble upon this job application on Indeed over quarantine. And I was like, shoot, like I'd love to be in the strength room. I was in the court at my high school coaching for the last 4 years, but now I've transitioned into the strength room over at M14. In terms of what my main focuses are, first of all, as an assistant coach, it's my job to make the head coach's job easier. So really being that role of support and, making sure things are taken care of, barbells are in the right position, weights are where they need to be, equipment's where they need to be for each stuff, each block of exercises and stuff. But in terms of working with the kids, I would say like one thing I've learned big time is coaching from a distance. It's something that's very new to me. But we have big groups. So we have usually between 5 to our max is 20 kids at the same time. So we'll have like 3, 4, even 5 stations going at the same time with different exercises going up the chain. Nothing really too intense or anything to nothing like clean snatches or anything like where you need to spot or watch really closely. But being able to watch kids from a far distance in a sense and be able to give them 1 or 2 quick verbal cues to focus on to almost like help, I don't want to say fix, but like optimize their form to maybe have them feel the right muscles or work the correct body area that we're really trying to target with those exercises. And so it's taught me to be more of an essentialist as a coach, if that makes any sense, or to really reduce or like really concentrate my coaching cues down to 1 or 2 specific things that make the athlete like lock into what we're trying to do. So for example, I wouldn't throw like 5 different cues at them that are internal, like, I don't know, keep your back flat, tuck your chin in, squeeze your shoulder blades back or whatever. Because then all of a sudden they're like, what am I doing, coach? Like maybe I would just say like, watch yourself in the mirror, eyes in the mirror. Or if they're doing like a supine bridge or something, I would, and they're too worried on where their body is and looking up, I'd say, look at the ceiling. Or if their knees are starting to collapse in during a squat, which a head coach doesn't quite want, I would just say, push your knees out. Something like simple like that. And something I'm really still working on, I still struggle at. Instead of throwing 10 cues at someone, just simplify it. I saw an Instagram post by Nick Winkelman, who's I would highly recommend as a follow.
The cueing guru.
Yeah, he just posts stuff and it blows my mind. And it's like this short little sentences. But it said that if you are still on the lines of like, if you as a coach are giving your athlete more than 1 cue to focus on, you're not coaching them properly. Like it should only be 1 cue. And I'm like, dang, I got a long ways to go as a coach. So that's one really like strong area of focus for me in the weight room with those kids.
Yeah. I mean, I can equate that to, I did some small group training and personal training while I was going through PT school. And then actually in the 3 years after physical therapy school, and something that I will remember, right, with squatting and sprinting, those were the 2 biggest areas that I found myself very, very basic, right? You're either running fast or you're going through triple flexion and then standing up again. But that was a time period of my life where I didn't have all of the information that I had now. And I remember being the overcuer, but it was not until my later years, through experience and through experiencing or having exposure to people like Nick Winkelman and other really, really good coaches, that I learned it was important to be effective, efficient, and compelling, right? So effective, meaning the fact that it actually got through to them and it worked. Efficient, less was more.
Mm-hmm.
And compelling, such that it was something that gravitated with them and stuck with them, right? It was something that they were able to absorb and ideally keep with them. So maybe something that's a little bit catchy, right? Sometimes things are a little bit more compelling, or things that we either have associations to or really hammer home with us. So that's just something that I think is carried over into my ability to be a better PT. And then ideally in the role that I'm in right now, I hate to say that I'm managing people. I'm more coaching people, right? So I'm coaching my team, and I want to try to be very effective, efficient, and compelling again.
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah,
I love that. And even like sometimes it's so easy for us as coaches to jump on like 10 different things to coach kids on, right? Because you see a kid perform a half kneeling shoulder press with a 5-pound dumbbell, and like, holy crap, like there's just so many like part of it is like, we should never demonize movement. No movement is a bad movement, but obviously there's an ideal way of optimizing that and driving the outcomes we want. But I was one of those kids too that I sometimes as a young kid I couldn't figure out what my body was in space, and so those specific things, sometimes different things stick to me. Like for example, punch the ceiling on that. So like that's what I tell the kids: punch the ceiling, or if they're throwing a medicine ball against the wall, like imagine my face on the wall and then just boom, take out your arms and hit it as hard as you can. Punch the wall. Even like that, it's like, geez, like that actually is, it could be effective. It's very efficient for sure. And is it compelling? It depends on the kid. But that's where that whole psychosocial aspect comes into play as well, which is something that I'll definitely come across in the clinic big time.
Yeah. And you mentioned external cues, like a lot of really, really good external cues. You didn't mention it specifically, but you're speaking to them. And I remember some of the stuff where, you're going through these internal cueing or things that don't really have any context around them, and people looking at you just kind of being like, what are you talking about? And that's when you go through, all right, well, clearly what I'm doing right now is not working. But then going through a period of time where I thought I needed to be the perfect form coach, and then appreciating the fact that there's a spectrum of movement, and then some of the things that I actually used to think mattered didn't really matter nearly as much. So it's always just interesting to sit back and reflect and kind of look at your evolution. For you, your evolution is now transitioning, right? You're in your first year of physical therapy school, and a good thing for you is you really don't know any better when it comes to virtual PT school. So share for the listeners a little bit about what that's been like in your first semester.
Yeah, there's good and bads. I think honestly, it's been more of a blessing than we realize it has been. It's first of all, like lecture stuff. It's my first fall semester. It's my second semester of PT school, first year. So we're very heavy on didactic stuff right now. A lot of lecture content. And so the online aspect is pretty nice, honestly, for lectures. You don't have to drive to the facility. You can have a snack, or you can be in your PJs during lecture. But also they record lectures as well, so you can go back and refer to those things. You can screenshot things easier. I think it's easier to learn online for me personally in a lecture format like that. But when it comes to hands-on lab experiences, we have 2 labs this semester. One of them has been online, one of them in person. And I will say it's tough not to have have those psychomotor reps, if you will, where you're touching someone, or you're working with, trying to teach an exercise, stuff like that. So missing that aspect of a little bit of palpation, a little bit of manual muscle testing, really honing my goniometer skills down for amongst different people has been a little bit tougher this semester. That being said, I do have upper hand on various different things. I live with 3 of my classmates, so we can practice together, which is super nice. And then having that job as a strength coach, man, like how clutch is that? Like it's so refreshing to be able to step away from the books, put the laptop down, and just go coach, and just go be with people and help them move better and help them gain confidence and self-efficacy through movement, because that is a huge chunk of what I will be doing in the clinic. And so just having that, we had our first therapeutic exercise class this semester, And that's been the online lab where like they show us exercise on video and then we're supposed to be doing it, but it's like, it's not the same. It's so much more fluid than that. But having like that, my job as a trainer, gosh, like it helps so much because I'm getting those reps in as well. So that's kind of what the experience has been like. One other side note, also, we lost the cadaver lab, but you can easily find a virtual atlas that you can, play around with, and a virtual cadaver that you can dig around in as well. So that was a huge loss. Actually, it was a huge time saver as well, and allowed me to work more at the training facility. So all in all, I'd say the net gain has been positive for that, I would say. And like we said before, we were just chatting before, adapt and overcome is the only option we have. And it's the human experience. You have a setback, you have an obstacle, and it becomes an opportunity to capitalize and to gain more out of an experience.
Well, Ben, I think it's safe to say that's a great thing to let people end on. What I want people to be able to do with you, though, is connect with you after we're done today. So where are the best places for people to reach out to you and stay connected with you?
Yeah, I think my professional Instagram is maybe the best place. You can just find me at benlee.pt. That's BENLEE.pt. Just shoot me a DM on there. I love just connecting with various different people from different walks of life, different professions, especially outside of PT. I think there's a lot to learn from everyone. I think Instagram is has really evolved into a great professional platform where people can be very casual, but also share and have a forum about different things, comments, threads, DMs, you name it. So go ahead and shoot me a DM on there. I love to connect with you on there.
And just a quick warning to everybody, Ben does not come with any kind of softball questions, okay? Right? He's coming with a heavy-hitting list of questions, so just be on your toes. But Ben, thanks for making time for me today. I look forward to hopefully eventually hosting you at some point at Rehab Perform. We'll see how that goes, but best of luck to you and your family, and have a happy holidays.
You too, Josh. Thanks so much for having me on.